Welcome back to Whispers of Wisdom, the channel where timeless books speak softly but change you deeply. Here, we don't just summarize books, we enter them, chapter by chapter, idea by idea, until their wisdom becomes personal. In this video, we continue our cinematic journey through Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, a book divided into 4 powerful parts, each marking a deeper descent into the philosophy of becoming, courage, solitude, and self-overcoming. This is our 10th video in the playlist, where we explore part 3, chapters 45 to 52, some of the most intense and inward chapters of the entire work. In these chapters, Zarathustra walks as a wanderer, faces the terrifying vision of eternal return, experiences involuntary bliss, stands before sunrise, confronts the danger of shrinking virtues, rests briefly on the Olive Mount, learns the art of passing by, and finally encounters the pain of apostasy, those who once believed but turned back. This is where the philosophy stops being theoretical and becomes existential. If you've ever felt alone on your path, misunderstood, tempted to rest too early, or wounded by people who abandoned their own ideals, this video is for you. Inward turn, where movement through the world mirrors a deeper movement through the self. Because wandering here is not travel for novelty or escape, but the necessary solitude of one who has gone beyond familiar values and must now learn to endure without shelter, certainty, or audience. He walks without destination, not because he is lost, but because fixed destinations belong to those who still need guarantees. And Zarathustra has learned that becoming demands exposure to uncertainty, to heights without railings, to paths that test whether one's strength is real or merely inherited. The wanderer carries within him the weight of everything he is taught and everything he has not yet dared to teach. And this weight makes companionship impossible, because few can walk beside someone who is no longer protected by shared beliefs. Zarathustra speaks of the necessity of this wandering as a trial by distance, a way of stripping away borrowed convictions, second-hand courage, and the comforting echo of agreement, until only what truly belongs to the self remains. He understands that many admire wanderers in theory, but fear them in reality, because a true wanderer exposes the arbitrariness of settled lives and reminds others that what they call stability may be nothing more than habit hardened into destiny. As he walks, Zarathustra reflects that every great elevation of the spirit requires a period of homelessness, because one cannot build new tables of values while still sleeping beneath the old roof. He acknowledges the loneliness of this state, the nights where even one's own thoughts feel like strangers. Yet he affirms that this loneliness is not emptiness, but preparation, the quiet space where deeper necessities begin to speak. Zarathustra rejects the romantic image of wandering as freedom without responsibility, insisting instead that it is a discipline, a voluntary exposure to danger, misunderstanding, and inner conflict, undertaken not for pleasure, but for truth. he senses that only those who can endure being unmoored from praise and blame alike are capable of discovering values that do not depend on approval. The wanderer learns to and this inner measurement becomes harsher than any external criticism. Zarathustra warns that many who begin as wanderers secretly hope to be found, to be recognized, to be welcomed back as heroes. But the true wanderer must relinquish even this hope, accepting that his path may never intersect with the comfort of belonging again. He speaks of how wandering sharpens perception, because one who cannot rely on familiarity must learn to read signs, moods, and forces more deeply. And in this heightened awareness, Zarathustra feels life itself speaking more clearly, unfiltered by convention. The wanderer becomes a test of strength, not through dramatic trials, but through endurance, through the slow accumulation of solitude, through the temptation to compromise one's vision in exchange for warmth, agreement, or rest. Zarathustra affirms that those who cannot wander long will eventually betray their highest insight, because they will trade depth for relief. But those who persist will discover that solitude itself becomes a teacher, revealing patterns of thought, hidden resentments, and unexamined fears that only silence can expose. He understands now that his previous teachings were addressed outwardly, but this wandering demands an inward honesty more severe than anything he has demanded of others. The chapter closes with Zarathustra walking onward without promise of arrival, carrying within him a growing intensity, because the wanderer's path is leading not toward answers, but toward a vision so demanding that only one who has learned to stand alone without consolation will be able to bear it. And in this movement, the third part truly begins, not as doctrine, but as destiny unfolding step by step. Chapter 46, The Vision and the Enigma. Zarathustra now reaches the heart of his journey in a vision that arrives not as a clear teaching, but as an enigma, because the deepest truths do not present themselves as explanations, but as images that test the strength, honesty, and courage of the one who beholds them. And this chapter marks the first full emergence of the thought that will dominate everything that follows. Zarathustra describes ascending a mountain path with a dwarf clinging to his shoulder, a figure heavy, mocking, and skeptical, representing the spirit of gravity itself, that force which weighs down all striving by reducing it to comfort, reasonableness, and resignation. As Zarathustra climbs, the path narrows, the air grows thin, and the pressure of height increases, symbolizing the difficulty of thinking beyond inherited values and linear time. And the dwarf whispers that all things that are straight must lie, that all truth is crooked, that time itself is a circle repeating endlessly without meaning. Yet this whisper is not a triumphant revelation, but a belittling one, meant to shrink the soul rather than elevate it. Zarathustra reaches a gateway called moment, where two paths stretch out endlessly in opposite directions. one leading into the past and one into the future. And here the enigma crystallizes. If time stretches infinitely backward and forward, and if all things recur, then everything that has happened must happen again, not once, but eternally. And this thought stands before Zarathustra, not as a theory, but as a weight capable of crushing or transfiguring the soul. The dwarf mocks this vision, reducing it to a mechanical loop, a childish repetition devoid of meaning. And Zarathustra immediately rejects this interpretation because it lacks affirmation, creation, and responsibility, turning eternity into boredom rather than challenge. Zarathustra understands that the eternal return is not about sameness imposed from outside, but about the demand placed upon the individual will. Can you affirm your life so completely that you would will its repetition? Every joy, every pain, every mistake, every moment of weakness and triumph, not once, but eternally, without regret or resentment. At this moment, Zarathustra sees a vision of a shepherd lying on the ground, choking, with a black serpent lodged in his throat, symbolizing the suffocating weight of this thought when it is swallowed passively rather than confronted actively. The serpent represents nihilism, the horror of meaninglessness, the temptation to despair when faced with infinite repetition. And the shepherd's suffering reveals what happens when the eternal return is experienced as a curse rather than a task. Zarathustra cries out to the shepherd to bite off the serpent's head, to actively confront and overcome the terror rather than submit to it. And when the shepherd finally does so, he leaps up transformed, laughing with a laughter never heard before, a laughter born not of comfort, but of victory, test of strength, asking whether one can transform the heaviest thought into the greatest affirmation, whether one can turn the weight of existence into a source of joy rather than paralysis. Zarathustra realizes that this thought divides humanity more sharply than any moral doctrine, because it demands not belief but capacity, not obedience but strength, and that most will recoil from it, not because it is false, but because it is unbearable. The spirit of gravity seeks to trivialize the eternal return, to turn it into a joke or a deterministic trap. But Zarathustra understands that its power lies precisely in its demand that one become worthy of one's life, that one live in such a way that one could will its repetition. The chapter closes with Zarathustra carrying this vision within him as both burden and promise, knowing that he cannot yet teach it openly, because it requires a type of human not yet prepared to hear it, and that the rest of his journey will be shaped by this question alone. Can life be affirmed without remainder? And can the human spirit rise high enough to say yes, even to eternity itself? Zarathustra remains within the vision, and the enigma deepens rather than resolves, because the thought that has revealed itself does not wish to be solved, but endured. And endurance here means allowing the full gravity of eternity to settle upon the will, without seeking escape through simplification, denial, or false consolation. He feels how the image of the gateway called moment presses upon him again and again. Because this threshold is not merely a place in time, but a demand placed upon every decision, every breath, every impulse, asking whether it is lived as something one would choose again if choice were infinite and irrevocable. Zarathustra senses that the true terror of the eternal return is not repetition itself, but responsibility. The realization that nothing can be dismissed as insignificant when every instant carries the weight of forever. And this realization strips away all excuses, all hopes of redemption through later correction, all dreams of compensation beyond life. He understands that under this vision, even the smallest cowardice becomes monumental, and even the slightest affirmation becomes heroic, because each act echoes endlessly, shaping not only a life, but eternity itself. The dwarf's presence lingers, whispering again that this thought leads only to exhaustion, that no spirit can bear such weight without breaking. And Zarathustra recognizes this voice as the rationalization of weakness, the temptation to protect oneself by shrinking the scope of existence rather than expanding one's strength to meet it. He feels the pull to reinterpret the eternal return as a mere cosmological theory, something distant and abstract, because abstraction offers refuge from the demand to live differently here and now. Yet he resists this pull, knowing that to do so would betray the vision's true power. Zarathustra realizes that the enigma does not ask whether the world repeats, but whether the soul can rise to a point where repetition becomes desirable, where life is lived with such intensity, coherence, and affirmation that even its suffering is embraced as necessary. The image of the shepherd returns to him, not as a single figure, but as humanity itself, choking on the serpent of nihilism, because the eternal return, when encountered without strength, threatens to suffocate meaning entirely, turning existence into an unbearable loop devoid of purpose. Zarathustra sees that the serpent can only be overcome through an act of will, a decisive yes that bites through despair rather than analyzing it endlessly. And this act is not blind optimism, but a courageous affirmation grounded in self-overcoming. He understands now why this thought cannot be taught directly, because it is not information, but transformation. And those who hear it prematurely would twist it into fatalism, mockery, or despair, using it to justify passivity rather than greatness. The enigma thus becomes a test, not only of Zarathustra's strength, but of his patience, because he must wait for the right moment, the right listeners, and perhaps even the right age before unveiling it fully. He feels the loneliness of this knowledge pressing upon him, because to carry such a thought without sharing it is to live with a secret that reshapes perception at every turn, making ordinary life feel both heavier and more luminous. Zarathustra senses that from this point onward, nothing can be experienced one would not wish away. The enigma does not permit neutrality. It demands either rejection or transformation. And Zarathustra knows that most will choose rejection, not out of malice, but out of fear, because the eternal return abolishes the comfort of hopping, that life's pain will be justified elsewhere. As he descends from the height of this vision, Zarathustra carries with him a strange mixture of exhaustion and exaltation, because, although the thought weighs heavily, it also reveals a path beyond resentment, beyond the hatred of time that he diagnosed earlier, offering a form of redemption that does not deny suffering, but redeems it through affirmation. He understands now that the wanderer's solitude was necessary preparation for this encounter, because only one who has learned to stand alone can face eternity without collapsing into despair. The chapter closes not with resolution, but with a trembling equilibrium, as Zarathustra holds the enigma within him like a seed that must not yet break open, knowing that the rest of his journey will consist of learning how to live, teach, and endure under the silent command of this thought, until the moment arrives when it can no longer remain unspoken and must either be affirmed aloud or destroy him from within. Chapter 47, Involuntary Bliss. Zarathustra now enters involuntary bliss, and this chapter unfolds as a strange, dangerous aftershock to the vision he has just endured. Because what follows the heaviest thought is not relief or clarity, but a sudden, almost suspicious joy that arrives without permission, without reason, and without moral justification. This bliss does not arise from comfort or success, but from the sheer fact of having survived the encounter with eternity without breaking. And Zarathustra senses immediately that this joy is not something he has earned through effort, nor something he can command or prolong, which is why it both intoxicates and unsettles him. He experiences a lightness that feels intellect is exhausted and the will is wounded. Zarathustra recognizes that this bliss is dangerous precisely because it is involuntary, because it tempts one to mistake a momentary state for a final achievement, to believe that one has arrived, when in fact one is only passing through. He understands that many spiritual seekers become trapped here, clinging to moments of ecstasy as proof of enlightenment, building identities around fleeting highs, and in doing so they avoid the deeper, more demanding task of integrating joy into life as a whole, rather than chasing it as an exception. Zarathustra feels gratitude for this joy, but refuses to worship it, because he senses that true affirmation cannot depend on moods, rapture, or emotional peaks, but must endure even when joy withdraws. This bliss, he realizes, is a gift from life itself, a sign that life has not rejected him despite the severity of the vision he has borne. Yet it is also a test, asking whether he will become attached to pleasure or remain faithful to becoming. Zarathustra reflects that joy which comes unbidden cannot be commanded to stay, and that trying to preserve it would turn it into a lie, because it would replace openness with grasping. He observes how easily humans confuse happiness with truth, assuming that what feels good must be right. And he recognizes this as another subtle temptation to abandon rigor for comfort. The involuntary bliss thus becomes a mirror, revealing how affirmation is not the elimination of suffering, but the capacity to welcome joy without clinging to it, to allow pleasure without enslaving oneself to its return. Zarathustra senses that this joy arises precisely because he did not seek it, because he faced the heaviest thought without bargaining for reward. And this insight teaches him that life grants its highest gifts only to those who do not demand them. He feels the contrast sharply. After the crushing weight of eternity, even simple existence feels luminous, and yet he knows that this luminosity will fade because it must, and that the true test lies not in moments of bliss, but in the long stretches of ordinary time that follow. Zarathustra warns inwardly against becoming intoxicated with his own affirmation passage, a reminder that life can still say yes to him, even after he has dared to say yes to it in its entirety. As the joy begins to recede, Zarathustra does not curse its departure, because he has learned that to resent the passing of joy is to betray it, and instead he allows it to leave without bitterness, carrying forward only the knowledge that affirmation is possible. The chapter closes with Zarathustra steadied rather than elevated, grounded rather than intoxicated, aware now that the path ahead will not be marked by constant rapture, but by endurance, patience, and fidelity to the heaviest thought, and that true strength lies not in perpetual bliss, but in the ability to continue becoming even when joy no longer carries you forward. Chapter 48, Before Sunrise. Zarathustra now speaks before sunrise, and this moment is charged with a quiet, trembling intensity, because it unfolds in that fragile hour when darkness has not yet yielded, but light is already inevitable. And in this threshold state, he reflects on existence with a clarity sharpened by solitude and patience. Before sunrise is not yet day, and this matters deeply, because Zarathustra is not celebrating fulfillment, but standing with faith before arrival, embodying a love for life that does not require guarantees or completed victories. He looks upon the world while it still sleeps, when judgments are silent and demands momentarily suspended. And in this stillness, he discovers a form of affirmation purer than joy and stronger than hope, a trust in becoming itself. Zarathustra speaks here as one who has learned to love the earth without needing it to justify itself, without demanding that it be moral, meaningful, or consoling. And this love marks a decisive break from metaphysical longing. He declares that he loves life not because it is good, but because it is, and because it grows, changes, and overcomes itself endlessly, even through destruction and loss. Before sunrise, he feels closest to the innocence of becoming, because nothing has yet been named, judged, or condemned, and the world exists in a state of open possibility. Zarathustra becomes another form of resentment when life fails to meet expectations. He affirms instead a love that precedes evaluation, a love that says yes before asking why. And this affirmation represents a spiritual maturity beyond hope and despair alike. Zarathustra senses that those who can love life before sunrise are rare, because most need daylight, clarity, and success before they dare to affirm existence. Yet, it is precisely this early love that sustains strength through inevitable darkness. He speaks of the sun not as a savior, but as a symbol of recurrence, of daily return, reminding that affirmation must be renewed again and again without final rest. Before sunrise, Zarathustra feels gratitude without object, a reverence without worship, and a joy without intoxication, because he has learned that life owes him nothing, and that this very lack of obligation frees him to love it without bitterness. He reflects that this love is not passive acceptance, but active participation, a willingness to rise again and again into existence, even when the future is uncertain and the past heavy. Zarathustra understands that this moment is fleeting, that daylight will soon return with its noise, demands, and misunderstandings. Yet he treasures this hour because it teaches him how to endure those demands without losing his affirmation. The chapter closes with Zarathustra standing quietly before the coming sun, neither praying nor hopping, but ready, strengthened by a love that does not depend on outcomes, and prepared to step once more into the world, carrying the quiet certainty that to love life itself, even before it reveals its face, is the highest wisdom he has yet attained. Zarathustra remains before sunrise, lingering in that suspended hour where the world has not yet spoken its demands and existence itself feels lighter, more truthful, because it has not yet been interpreted, judged, or bent into human meanings. And in this silence, he deepens his reflection on what it means to affirm life without illusion. He understands now that most people love life only after sunrise, only when clarity turns dark again. Standing in the pre-dawn stillness, he realizes that true affirmation must precede explanation, must arise before reasons. Otherwise, it is merely gratitude for favorable conditions, rather than a fundamental yes to existence. He speaks inwardly to life itself, not as a supplicant or judge, but as a lover who does not demand faithfulness, meaning, or reward. And this love feels almost frightening in its freedom, because it removes all excuses for resentment. Zarathustra sees how humans poison their relationship with existence by waiting for guarantees, by loving only what promises comfort, progress, or moral order. And he recognizes that this expectation is the hidden root of disappointment, because life never promised to be fair, intelligible, or gentle. Before sunrise, he practices loving life as it is becoming rather than as it should be. And this practice requires a strength that few cultivate, because it means relinquishing the need to be protected by hope. He reflects that hope, though often praised, can become a subtle form of postponement, a way of deferring affirmation until conditions improve, whereas his love before sunrise affirms without postponement, embracing uncertainty as part of life's rhythm. Zarathustra senses that this moment mirrors the eternal return itself, because each dawn is both repetition and renewal, asking whether one can greet the day not as a burden, but as something one would choose again. He observes that the world in this hour is neither innocent nor guilty, neither meaningful nor meaningless, and that this neutrality reveals a deeper innocence beneath all moral interpretations. Zarathustra realizes that to love life before sunrise is to love it before it explains itself, before it pleads its case. And this love grants a kind of sovereignty over suffering, because one no longer demands that pain justify itself in order to be endured. He acknowledges that this love is quiet, not triumphant, not ecstatic like involuntary bliss, but steadier, more durable, capable of lasting through long stretches of difficulty without turning into bitterness. As the first light begins to gather on the horizon, Zarathustra feels neither urgency nor relief, because he has learned that affirmation does not depend on illumination, and that even darkness belongs to the dance of becoming. He prepares to step back into the world, carrying with him the memory of this hour as a standard against which all later judgments must be measured, knowing that whenever resentment threatens to return, he can recall this moment when he loved existence without asking anything of it. The chapter closes with Zarathustra turning toward the coming day, not with hope or fear, but with readiness, strengthened by the quiet discipline of loving life before it reveals its face, and understanding that this love, practiced again and again, is what will make him capable of enduring both the weight of eternity and the demands of the world without surrendering his affirmation. Chapter 49. The Bee Dwarfing Virtue. Zarathustra now turns his gaze toward what he calls the bed-dwarfing virtue, and here his tone sharpens, because he is no longer confronting obvious enemies like despair or nihilism, but something far more insidious, a morality that presents itself as goodness, safety, and wisdom, while quietly shrinking the human spirit, lowering aspirations, and tamming greatness in the name of balance and moderation. He observes that this virtue does not command openly or violently, but works slowly, politely, and persuasively, teaching people to be reasonable rather than bold, cautious rather than daring, content rather than creative. And in doing so, it convinces them that smallness is maturity and restraint is superiority. Zarathustra sees that the bed-dwarfing virtue praises humility not as self-knowledge, but as self-limitation, urging individuals to measure themselves against the weakest, rather than the highest possibilities of human becoming. And this leveling impulse disguises envy as fairness and fear as moral concern. He notes how this virtue claims to protect humanity from excess, danger, and suffering. Yet, its true effect is to protect humanity from greatness itself, from the risks required to create new values, from the intensity that accompanies real transformation. Zarathustra exposes how this virtue celebrates moderation as an absolute, forgetting that all creation requires safe and endlessly unfinished. Chapter 50, On the Olive Mount. Zarathustra now stands upon the Olive Mount, and this setting is chosen with quiet precision because the olive tree symbolizes peace, endurance, maturity, and the temptation to rest beneath one's own shade. And here Zarathustra confronts not enemies, despair, or resistance, but something far subtler and more dangerous: the desire to remain at peace too long after struggle, to linger in hard-earned calm and mistake rest for fulfillment. He reflects that every creator eventually reaches such a mountain, a place earned through suffering and solitude, where the air is gentle, the view wide, and the temptation to stop growing feels justified, even wise. Zarathustra acknowledges the sweetness of this peace, because it is not laziness, but the calm that follows self-overcoming, the quiet that comes after storms of becoming. And he does not condemn it outright, yet he senses the hidden danger in this calm, because peace, when clung to, can harden into stagnation, and endurance can quietly turn into avoidance of further risk. Zarathustra observes that many who have suffered greatly eventually grow weary of transformation itself, convincing themselves that rest is the highest goal, that equilibrium is wisdom, and that further striving is unnecessary excess. He sees how easily this attitude masquerades as maturity, presenting itself as balance, acceptance, and self-care, while quietly abandoning the future. On the Olive Mount, Zarathustra feels gratitude for the stillness, but refuses to sanctify it, because he understands that life's deepest loyalty is not to peace, but to movement, not to rest, but to overcoming. He reflects that even the olive tree, ancient and resilient, bears fruit only through cycles of growth and strain, and that its endurance is not static, but dynamic. Zarathustra warns himself that to remain too long in comfort is to betray the very forces that carried him there, because peace becomes poisonous when it becomes a refuge from destiny rather than a pause within it. He recognizes that this temptation opposition, but through satisfaction, slowly repeating themselves, guarding their reputation, and defending their calm rather than risking new becoming. He understands that peace must remain a passage, not a dwelling, a gathering of strength rather than a final home. On the Olive Mount, he recommits himself inwardly to movement, accepting that future storms are not signs of failure, but necessities of life's rhythm. He acknowledges that peace has taught him gratitude and patience, but insists that gratitude must not become attachment, and patience must not become postponement. Zarathustra affirms that the highest faithfulness to life lies in the willingness to leave even beautiful places behind, to abandon even well-earned serenity when it threatens to close the path forward. As the chapter closes, Zarathustra prepares to descend from the Olive Mount, carrying with him not contempt for peace, but mastery over it, knowing now that true strength is measured not by one's ability to find rest, but by one's willingness to rise again from it, again and again, for the sake of becoming what one has not yet dared to be. Chapter 51, On Passing By. Zarathustra now speaks of passing by, and this chapter unfolds like a quiet yet relentless wind that teaches the most difficult discipline of all: how to remain faithful to one's path without being swallowed by every suffering, every voice, every demand encountered along the way. He begins by acknowledging that the world is filled with need, pain, injustice, longing, and countless hands reaching out. And the instinct of the compassionate soul is to stop, to kneel, to listen, to carry, to heal, to stay. Zarathustra does not deny the nobility of compassion, but he reveals its hidden danger, because compassion without mastery can become a chain that binds the creator to what must be overcome rather than transformed. As he passes by towns, people, cries, and broken hopes, Zarathustra feels the pull to intervene, to explain, to rescue. Yet not every suffering wants release, and not every cry is a call upward. Many are invitations to remain, to sink, to be equalized downward. Zarathustra sees how easily the strong can be drained by the weak when compassion becomes a habit rather than a conscious choice, and how creators are often destroyed not by enemies, but by endless giving to those who do not wish to rise. He teaches that passing by is not abandonment, but discernment, not cruelty, but discipline, not arrogance, but responsibility to one's own highest task. He reflects that every great path demands solitude not because others are unworthy, but because becoming cannot be crowded, negotiated, or delayed without losing its shape. Zarathustra observes that many people cling to their suffering as identity, wearing it like a badge, resenting those who refuse to share it, and demanding empathy as proof of love. Yet he knows that true love sometimes looks like refusal, distance, and silence. As he walks past those who curse him for not stopping, he accepts their anger without resentment, because he understands that his path is not theirs, and theirs is not his. He warns that the desire to be loved by all is the surest way to betray one's destiny, because the crowd always demands sameness, comfort, and reassurance, never transformation. Zarathustra speaks of how compassion can secretly flatter the ego, making one feel necessary, important, and morally superior, and how this hidden vanity is more dangerous than open selfishness. He insists that the highest compassion is not to carry others indefinitely, but to awaken in them the strength to walk, even if that awakening feels harsh or lonely. Passing by becomes a sacred art, the art of giving without attachment, helping without staying, listening without surrendering direction, and loving without dissolving one's own form. Zarathustra reflects on how creators must learn to say no without bitterness, to withdraw without hatred, and to continue forward even when misunderstood, accused, or called heartless. He understands that those who truly create new values will always appear cruel to those who cling to old wounds, because movement itself feels like abandonment to those who refuse to move. As he continues his journey, Zarathustra feels both lightness and passes by endlessly, leaving no one fully comforted, and that to imitate life is to accept impermanence rather than cling to every moment. Zarathustra teaches that the measure of strength is not how much suffering one can absorb, but how clearly one can choose when to engage and when to move on. In the closing movement of the chapter, Zarathustra walks on with steady steps, no longer haunted by guilt for those he leaves behind, because he has learned that guilt is often the weapon of stagnation, designed to halt the becoming of the strong. He carries with him a refined compassion, one that does not kneel at every cry, but listens for the call of future heights, knowing that to pass by is sometimes the greatest service one can offer to life, to oneself, and to those who must learn to stand without being carried. Chapter 52, The Apostates. Zarathustra now encounters the apostates, and the tone of this chapter is heavy with quiet disappointment rather than anger, because betrayal wounds deepest when it comes not from enemies, but from those who once walked the path, spoke the same language of becoming, and felt the same fire burning within them. He speaks of men and women who once climbed with courage, who dared to reject old gods, old morals, old comforts, yet who later turned back, not because the path was false, but because it demanded more than they were willing to give. Zarathustra observes that apostasy rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives softly, disguised as prudence, realism, maturity, and moderation. These former seekers tell themselves they have grown wiser, calmer, more balanced. Yet Zarathustra sees through the disguise and recognizes weariness, fear, and longing for shelter beneath old certainties. He does not mock them, for he understands how exhausting it is to live without guarantees, how tempting it is to return to familiar beliefs that promise rest, forgiveness, and meaning without struggle. Zarathustra reflects that many people can endure suffering, but few can endure freedom, because freedom demands continual self-creation without external validation. The apostates accuse Zarathustra of being extreme, dangerous, loved, because denial must erase memory in order to survive. Zarathustra feels the pain of watching the flame dim in their eyes, knowing that no argument can reignite a fire that has been consciously abandoned. He understands that betrayal of ideals is often accompanied by moral superiority, as apostates clothe their retreat in new virtues, preaching caution, humility, obedience, and harmony, as if these were discoveries rather than refuges. Zarathustra does not chase them, because he knows that persuasion cannot restore courage, and that calling them back would only deepen their resentment. Instead, he accepts that every path sheds companions, and that the higher one climbs, the fewer footsteps echo alongside. He speaks of how creators must be prepared to be misunderstood, abandoned, and even condemned by those who once praised them, and how this solitude is not a punishment, but a necessity of ascent. Zarathustra acknowledges that apostasy is not always permanent, yet he refuses to wait for returns, because waiting ties the future to the weakness of others. He teaches that loyalty to becoming must outweigh loyalty to relationships, memories, and shared beginnings, no matter how painful the separation. As he moves past the apostates, Zarathustra carries neither bitterness nor hope for reconciliation, only clarity, recognizing that each soul must answer for its own courage. He affirms that those who turn back must be allowed to do so without hatred, for coercion would only prove the weakness of the path forward. In the closing movement, Zarathustra walks on alone once more, strengthened rather than diminished by loss, knowing that every apostate is a reminder of the cost of the path, and that to remain faithful to one's highest vision is to accept solitude as the companion of truth. In this video, we journeyed through Zarathustra's deepest inner trials, the loneliness of the wanderer, the shock of confronting eternal recurrence, the strange sweetness of involuntary joy, the quiet power of dawn, the danger of small virtues that tame greatness, the seductive peace of the olive mount, the discipline of passing by suffering without losing oneself, and finally, the heartbreak of watching others abandon the path they once embraced. These chapters teach us that the greatest struggle is not against enemies, but against weariness, comfort, guilt, and retreat. If this episode resonated with you, make sure to explore the earlier videos in this playlist, where we unfold the foundations of Zarathustra's vision step by step. And don't forget, this journey is far from over. In the next video, we move into the next phase of part 3, where Zarathustra returns home, confronts gravity itself, rewrites old and new values, and prepares for the most transformative revelations of the entire book. Stay with Whispers of Wisdom. Subscribe if these ideas speak to you, and walk with me into the next chapter, because the path forward only reveals itself to those who dare to continue.